Noah Bennett thought the worst thing that could happen to a burned-out single dad at the beach was his son throwing a tantrum. He was wrong. What happened that afternoon with his polished, untouchable neighbor Claire was so mortifying he wanted the sand to swallow him whole. But that humiliating moment, the one he was certain had ruined everything, turned out to be the beginning of something he never saw coming. If you want to see how an embarrassing disaster became the love story Noah never expected, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Noah Bennett was 32 years old and he was tired. Not the kind of tired that sleep could fix, but the kind that had seeped into his bones over years of doing everything alone. He woke up tired. He went to bed tired. He existed in a permanent state of exhaustion that coffee couldn't touch and optimism couldn't penetrate. The move to the seaside town was supposed to help. That's what everyone said. Get out of the city. Find somewhere quiet. Let your kid grow up near the ocean. It'll be good for both of you. What they didn't mention was that exhaustion and loneliness were portable. They packed themselves right alongside the furniture and followed him to the coast like faithful, unwanted companions. Noah lived in a small rental house 3 blocks from the water, a weather-beaten place with peeling blue paint and a front porch that creaked when you walked on it. It wasn't much, but it was enough. 2 bedrooms, a kitchen that barely fit a table, and a backyard where his 7-year-old son Leo could dig holes and collect rocks and do all the weird, wonderful things kids did when they weren't glued to screens. Most days, Noah worked from the dining table, hunched over his laptop, churning out design work for clients who paid late and demanded revisions at midnight. Freelancing had sounded like freedom once. Now it just felt like a trap with better hours and worse benefits. He took every job that came his way because he had to. There was no safety net, no partner to split the bills with, no backup plan, just him and Leo, figuring it out one day at a time. The neighbors were polite but distant, the kind of people who waved from driveways and never invited you inside. Except for Claire Weston, who lived in the house next door and seemed to exist on a completely different plane of reality. Claire was 30, though she carried herself like someone older, poised, controlled, impeccably put together. She drove a sleek black sedan that always looked freshly washed. She left for work early and came home late, her heels clicking against the pavement with a rhythm that suggested purpose and discipline. She wore tailored clothes in neutral tones, and her hair was always smooth, always perfect, like she'd never experienced humidity or a bad hair day in her life. Noah had noticed her the day they moved in. It was hard not to. She was standing in her driveway, holding a coffee cup, watching the moving truck with a neutral expression that gave away nothing. When their eyes met, she nodded once, a polite acknowledgement that said, "I see you, but let's not make this weird," and then went back inside. That set the tone for the next 6 months. They were neighbors in the technical sense. They existed in adjacent spaces, saw each other in passing, exchanged the occasional good morning when their paths crossed. But there was a wall between them, invisible but solid. Claire seemed untouchable, like someone who had her life figured out and didn't need complications. Noah, on the other hand, felt like a walking disaster most days, rumpled, running late, perpetually one crisis away from falling apart. He told himself it didn't matter. He wasn't looking for anything. He didn't have the time or energy for it. His life was full enough with work deadlines and school pickups and the endless, relentless task of being a single parent. But sometimes, late at night when Leo was asleep and the house was quiet, Noah would sit on the porch and wonder what it would be like to talk to someone who wasn't 7 years old or asking him for a logo revision. He wondered what Claire's life looked like behind that calm, polished exterior. He wondered if she ever felt lonely too. He never asked, and she never offered. Until the day at the beach changed everything. It was a Saturday in late September, one of those perfect coastal afternoons where the sky was impossibly blue and the air smelled like salt and sunscreen. Noah had promised Leo they'd spend the day at the water, and for once, he didn't have a looming deadline breathing down his neck. It felt like a small miracle. They parked near the public access point and hauled their gear down to the sand. 2 towels, a cooler with sandwiches and juice boxes, a bucket and shovel for Leo, and a battered beach chair that Noah had bought at a yard sale. It wasn't fancy, but it was enough. Leo took off the moment his feet hit the sand, sprinting toward the water with the kind of wild, unfiltered joy that only kids could pull off. Noah followed at a slower pace, carrying the chair and trying not to trip over his own feet. The beach was crowded, but not packed. Families clustered under umbrellas. Couples walked hand in hand along the waterline, and a group of teenagers played volleyball near the dunes. It was the kind of scene that looked idyllic from a distance, the kind of thing people put on postcards and captioned with words like paradise and escape. Noah didn't feel like he was escaping anything. Mostly, he just felt out of place. He set up camp near the water, close enough that he could keep an eye on Leo, but far enough back that the waves wouldn't soak their stuff. The chair groaned when he sat down, threatening to collapse, but it held. Barely. For a while, things were fine. Leo played in the sand, building some kind of lopsided castle that defied all architectural logic. Noah watched, half relaxed, letting the sound of the waves dull the constant hum of worry in his head. Then he saw her. Claire was maybe 30 feet down the beach, standing near the water with a book in one hand and a wide-brimmed hat shading her face. She wore a simple black swimsuit and a white cover-up that looked effortlessly elegant, the kind of thing Noah associated with people who summered in places with names he couldn't pronounce. She looked calm, composed, completely at ease. Of course she did. Noah looked away quickly, feeling stupid for staring. It wasn't like he had any claim to her attention. They were neighbors, nothing more. The fact that he'd noticed her didn't mean anything. He noticed lots of things. That's what tired, lonely people did. They noticed. He tried to focus on Leo, but his attention kept drifting. Claire had moved closer to the water now, letting the waves wash over her feet. She looked peaceful, like someone who had figured out how to turn off the noise in her head. Noah envied that. "Dad! Dad! Look!" Leo was waving frantically, holding up a piece of driftwood like it was a priceless artifact. Noah waved back, giving him a thumbs up, and Leo beamed before running off again. That's when it happened. Noah stood up to stretch, and as he did, his foot caught on the edge of the cooler. He stumbled, arms flailing, trying to catch his balance. The chair tipped backward, the cooler tipped sideways, and Noah, in a desperate attempt to avoid face-planting into the sand, lunged forward, straight into Claire. They collided hard. Not a gentle bump, but a full-body crash that sent them both staggering. Claire dropped her book. Noah grabbed her arm instinctively, trying to steady her, but his momentum was too much. They went down together, landing in the shallow surf in a tangle of limbs and salt water. For a second, neither of them moved. Noah's brain short-circuited. He was on top of her, not completely, but enough that it was mortifying. His hand was on her shoulder. Her leg was pressed against his. Water soaked through his swim trunks and her cover-up, and somewhere in the distance, he could hear Leo laughing. "Oh my God," Noah said, his voice strangled. I didn't—" Claire blinked up at him, her expression unreadable. Her hat had come off and was floating a few feet away. Her hair was wet, plastered to her face, and she was staring at him like she couldn't quite process what had just happened. Noah scrambled backward, nearly falling again in his haste to get off her. "I'm sorry. I tripped. This wasn't—" Claire sat up slowly, water dripping from her cover-up. She looked at him, then at her floating hat, then back at him. "Are you okay?" Noah asked, his voice cracking. "Did I hurt you?" "I'm fine," Claire said, her tone carefully neutral. "I'm so sorry. I swear I didn't mean to. I just lost my balance and—" "It's fine," she said again. But there was something in her voice that suggested it was very much not fine. Noah wanted to die. Right there in the surf, in front of everyone. This was it. This was the moment that defined him as the bumbling idiot neighbor who tackled women at the beach. He'd have to move, change his name, enroll Leo in witness protection. Claire stood up, brushing sand off her legs. Her cover-up was ruined, clinging to her in wet, translucent patches. She bent down to retrieve her book, which was now waterlogged and falling apart. "I'll replace that," Noah said quickly. "Whatever it costs, I'll buy you 10 copies. Claire looked at the book, then at him. For a moment, he thought she might actually yell. He braced for it, expecting anger or disgust, or at the very least a cutting remark about personal space. Instead, she laughed. It wasn't a polite laugh or a forced one. It was real, sudden and surprised, like it had escaped before she could stop it. "It's a terrible book anyway," she said, holding up the soggy pages. "I was only reading it because my boss recommended it." Noah stared at her, too stunned to respond. Claire tucked a strand of wet hair behind her ear and gave him a look that was almost amused. "You're Noah, right? From next door?" "Yeah," Noah managed. "And you're Claire." "I am." She glanced down at herself, then back at him. This is not how I imagined introducing myself. Same, Noah said weakly. For what it's worth, I don't usually tackle people. Good to know. She picked up her hat, which was now full of water, and dumped it out. I'd hate to think this was a regular occurrence. Noah laughed, a nervous, disbelieving sound. I swear I'm not normally this much of a disaster. Claire raised an eyebrow. Are you sure about that? He wasn't, not at all, but he appreciated that she was giving him an out. Leo came running over, his face lit up with excitement. Dad, did you fall in the water? That was so funny. Yeah, buddy, Noah said, ruffling his son's hair. Real hilarious. Leo looked at Claire, his curiosity unfiltered. Are you okay? My dad knocked you down. I noticed, Claire said dryly, but then she crouched down to Leo's level, her expression softening. I'm fine. What's your name? Leo. Nice to meet you, Leo. I'm Claire. I live next door to you. I know, Leo said matter-of-factly. You have a really clean car. Claire smiled, a real smile this time, not the polite mask she usually wore. Thank you. I try. Noah felt something shift in his chest, a small crack in the wall he'd built around himself. This was the longest conversation he'd had with Claire in 6 months, and it had started with him literally knocking her into the ocean. If that wasn't a metaphor for his life, he didn't know what was. Claire stood up, wringing out her cover-up. I should probably go. I'm soaked. Right. Yeah. Again, I'm really sorry. She looked at him for a long moment, something unreadable flickering across her face. It's okay, Noah. Really. Accidents happen. She turned to leave, then paused. Hey, if you ever want to grab coffee or something, let me know. I'm around most weekends. Noah blinked. Wait, seriously? Why not? Claire shrugged, her tone casual, but her eyes holding something more deliberate. We're neighbors. Might as well be friendly. Before he could respond, she walked away, her wet cover-up clinging to her legs, her ruined book tucked under one arm. Noah stood there, dripping and confused, watching her disappear down the beach. Dad, Leo said, tugging on his hand. Are you friends with Claire now? I don't know, bud, Noah said honestly. I have no idea what just happened. But as they packed up their things and headed back to the car, Noah couldn't stop replaying the moment. The way Claire had laughed instead of yelling, the way she'd smiled at Leo, the way she'd offered coffee like it was the most natural thing in the world. Maybe he hadn't ruined everything after all. That night, after Leo was asleep, Noah sat on the porch with a beer he didn't really want and stared at Claire's house. The lights were on in her living room, casting a warm glow through the curtains. He wondered what she was doing, if she was thinking about the beach, if she'd meant what she said about coffee. He told himself not to overthink it. Claire was just being polite, neighborly. It didn't mean anything, but deep down, in a part of himself he'd buried under exhaustion and resignation, Noah felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. It scared the hell out of him, because hope was dangerous. Hope meant opening yourself up to disappointment, to rejection, to the possibility that things might not work out. And Noah had been disappointed enough for one lifetime. But Claire had smiled at him. She'd laughed. She'd invited him for coffee. And for the first time in months, Noah let himself wonder if maybe, just maybe, something good could come from the disaster he'd made at the beach. He didn't know it yet, but that awkward, humiliating collision was the beginning of everything. Over the next few days, Noah couldn't stop thinking about Claire. Not in an obsessive way, or at least he told himself it wasn't obsessive, but in the quiet, persistent way that happens when something unexpected cracks open a door you thought was permanently sealed. He'd see her pulling into her driveway after work and wonder if she remembered the beach. He'd hear her closing her front door in the morning and replay the sound of her laugh in his head. It was ridiculous. He barely knew her, but somehow that one chaotic moment had shifted something fundamental. Leo didn't help. When are we going to see Claire again? He asked one night at dinner, pushing peas around his plate with the concentration of a tiny architect. I don't know, bud. She's probably busy. But she said you could have coffee. Yeah, well, people say a lot of things. Leo frowned, his 7-year-old logic kicking in. But she lives right there. It's not like she's far away. Noah sighed. Eat your peas. I don't like peas. I know. Eat them anyway. It was easier to argue about vegetables than to explain why Noah was terrified of knocking on Claire's door. What would he even say? Hey, remember when I tackled you at the beach? Want to relive that magic over coffee? No. That was a terrible idea, but the thought wouldn't leave him alone. By Thursday, Noah cracked. He was out front trying to fix the wobbly railing on his porch, a task he'd been putting off for weeks, when Claire's car pulled into her driveway. She got out, juggling a purse, a laptop bag, and a to-go cup from the coffee shop downtown. She looked tired, her usual polish slightly dulled by what had clearly been a long day. Their eyes met. Noah froze, hammer in hand, feeling like an idiot. Claire paused, then walked over, carefully balancing her load. Hey, Noah said, trying to sound casual and failing. How's it going? Long day. She gestured at the railing. Fixing things? Trying to. Mostly just making it worse. Claire smiled faintly. Sounds familiar. There was a beat of silence, the kind that felt heavy with unspoken things. So, Noah said, because apparently his mouth had decided to operate independently of his brain. That coffee thing you mentioned, were you serious, or was that just a polite escape? Claire tilted her head, studying him. Why would I offer if I didn't mean it? I don't know. People do that sometimes. Say things to be nice. I don't, Claire said simply. Oh. Another silence. This one stretched longer. So, Claire said, shifting her bags. Are you asking me out for coffee, Noah? His heart kicked in his chest. I guess I am. Okay. Okay? Yeah. How about Saturday morning? There's a place near the pier that's not terrible. Noah nodded too quickly. Saturday works. What time? 9? 9's good. Great. Claire started to turn, then stopped. And Noah? Yeah? Leave Leo at home this time. She said it with a small, teasing smile, and then she was gone, disappearing into her house before he could respond. Noah stood there, hammer dangling from his hand, trying to process what had just happened. He had a date, or something like a date, with Claire. He was definitely going to screw this up. Saturday arrived with the kind of anxiety Noah usually reserved for client presentations, and Leo's parent-teacher conferences. He changed his shirt 3 times, debated shaving, then decided against it because what if she thought he was trying too hard? What if he was trying too hard? Leo watched him with the detached amusement of a child who had no concept of adult neuroses. You look nervous, Leo observed from the couch where he was watching cartoons. I'm not nervous. You keep looking in the mirror. I'm just making sure I don't look like a slob. You always look like a slob. Thanks, kid. Real confidence booster. Leo shrugged. Mrs. Patterson says you should just be yourself. Mrs. Patterson was Leo's second-grade teacher, a kind woman in her 50s who had no idea her wisdom was being weaponized by a 7-year-old. Mrs. Patterson's right, Noah muttered, grabbing his wallet. But being myself is exactly what I'm worried about. He left Leo with the neighbor, a retired guy named Dave, who liked to teach kids about birdwatching and had agreed to babysit for a couple of hours. Then Noah walked to the pier, his stomach doing flips the entire way. Claire was already there when he arrived, sitting at a small table outside the coffee shop. She wore jeans and a light sweater, her hair pulled back in a loose ponytail. She looked different without the work armor, softer, more approachable, but still impossibly put together in a way that made Noah feel like he'd rolled out of bed 5 minutes ago. She saw him and waved. Noah waved back and immediately tripped over a crack in the sidewalk. Smooth. You okay? Claire asked as he sat down, trying to look like he hadn't just stumbled like a drunk giraffe. Yeah, fine. Just testing the pavement. Claire raised an eyebrow but didn't comment. I ordered already. Hope that's okay. I got you a black coffee. You look like a black coffee person. I am, Noah admitted. How'd you guess? You have the vibe. What vibe is that? Functional but exhausted. Noah laughed despite himself. That's depressingly accurate. Claire smiled, and for a moment the tension in Noah's chest eased. This wasn't so bad. They were just 2 people having coffee. He could do this. The barista brought their drinks, and they sat in silence for a moment, watching the pier come to life around them. Joggers passed by, a couple of fishermen set up their lines at the end of the dock, and a group of seagulls fought over a discarded sandwich. "So," Claire said, breaking the silence, "how long have you been in town?" "About 6 months. Moved here from the city." "What brought you out here?" Noah hesitated. This was the part where he had to decide how much to share. The safe answer was something vague about wanting a change. The real answer was messier. He decided on somewhere in between. "I needed a reset," he said. "Things were complicated before. Single parenting in the city felt like drowning. I thought the ocean might help." "Did it?" "Not really," Noah admitted. "Turns out you can't outrun your problems. They just follow you to nicer scenery." Claire nodded, like she understood more than he'd said. "What do you do for work?" "Freelance graphic design, mostly branding stuff, logos, websites. It pays the bills, barely." "That sounds stressful." "It is," Noah said, "but it's flexible. I can be there for Leo when he needs me. That's the trade-off." Claire took a sip of her coffee, her expression thoughtful. "He's a great kid. You're doing something right." Noah felt a swell of unexpected emotion. He wasn't used to hearing that. Most days he felt like he was failing in slow motion. "Thanks," he said quietly. "That means a lot." "What about you?" Noah asked, trying to shift the focus. "How long have you been here?" 3 years. I moved for work." "What do you do?" "Marketing consultant. I work with startups mostly, helping them figure out their brand strategy." She said it matter-of-factly, like it was no big deal, but Noah could hear the weight behind it. "That sounds intense." "It is. Lots of travel, lots of late nights, lots of people expecting miracles." "Do you like it?" Claire paused, her fingers tracing the rim of her cup. "I used to. Now I'm not sure." It was the first crack in her armor, and Noah felt it like a shift in the air. "Why not?" he asked carefully. "Because it's exhausting," Claire said, her voice softer now. "And lonely. I'm good at what I do, but it doesn't leave room for much else. I wake up, I work, I come home, I go to bed. Repeat. And somewhere along the way I forgot what I was working toward." Noah understood that better than she knew. "Yeah," he said. "I get that." They sat in silence again, but this time it felt different. Less awkward, more comfortable. Like they'd both admitted something real and the world hadn't ended. "So," Claire said, a hint of teasing in her voice, "are you going to tell me what actually happened at the beach? Or are we just going to pretend it was a normal accident?" Noah groaned. "Do we have to?" "Yes. I need to know if I should be worried about you tackling me every time we cross paths." "It was a freak thing," Noah insisted. "I tripped over the cooler. I swear I wasn't trying to tackle me into the surf." "Exactly," Claire laughed, and it was the same genuine sound from the beach. "For what it's worth, it was the most interesting thing that's happened to me in months." "That's kind of sad." "Tell me about it." They talked for over an hour. About work, about Leo, about the weirdness of small-town life compared to the city. Claire told him about a disastrous client meeting where she'd spilled coffee on a CEO's white suit. Noah told her about the time Leo had gotten stuck in a playground tunnel and the fire department had to be called. It was easy, easier than Noah had expected. And when they finally stood to leave, he didn't want the morning to end. "This was nice," Claire said as they walked back toward their neighborhood. "Yeah," Noah agreed, "it was. We should do it again." Noah looked at her, surprised. "Really? Why not? Unless you're planning to tackle me again." "I'll do my best to restrain myself." Claire smiled, and for the first time since they'd met, Noah saw something in her eyes that looked like genuine interest. Not polite neighborly courtesy. Not obligation, but actual, real interest. "I'll hold you to that," she said. And then she was gone, disappearing into her house with a small wave. Noah stood on his porch, feeling like he'd just survived something, though he wasn't sure what. A date, a conversation, a test he didn't know he was taking. Whatever it was, he'd passed. And for the first time in a long time, Noah let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, something good was starting. Noah spent the rest of that Saturday trying not to overthink what had happened at the coffee shop. He failed spectacularly. By the time Leo got home from Dave's house, Noah had replayed every moment of the conversation at least a dozen times, analyzing each pause, each laugh, each shift in Claire's expression like he was decoding some ancient text. Had she enjoyed herself? Was she just being polite? Did she actually want to do it again? Or was that just something people said when they wanted to escape gracefully? "Dad, you're doing the thing again," Leo said from the doorway of the kitchen, where Noah was staring blankly at a pot of pasta he'd forgotten to stir. "What thing?" "The thinking too hard thing. Your face gets all scrunchy." Noah turned off the burner and dumped the pasta into a strainer, steam billowing up around his face. "I don't have a thinking too hard face." "You do. It's like this." Leo scrunched up his entire face, his eyes squinting and his mouth twisted into a knot. "I don't look like that." "You totally do." Noah sighed and divided the pasta onto 2 plates, adding butter and parmesan because that was the extent of his culinary ambition tonight. They sat down at the small table, and Leo immediately started talking about the birds Dave had shown him, something about a red-tailed hawk and a nest in the park. Noah listened, nodding in the right places, but his mind kept drifting back to Claire. She'd said they should do it again. That had to mean something, right? Or maybe it didn't. Maybe she was just being nice. Maybe he was reading into nothing. "Dad." "Yeah?" "You're not listening." "I am." "What did I just say?" Noah had no idea. "Something about a hawk?" Leo groaned. "You're impossible." "Sorry, bud. Long day." "Was coffee with Claire weird?" Noah blinked. "Why would it be weird?" "I don't know. You've been acting weird since you got back." "I'm not acting weird. You burned the pasta." Noah looked down at his plate. The edges of the noodles were definitely a little crispy. "Okay, fine. Maybe I'm a little distracted. Do you like her?" The question was so direct, so innocent that Noah didn't know how to answer it. He liked Claire. He liked the way she laughed, the way she didn't sugarcoat things, the way she'd looked at him like he was worth her time. But admitting that out loud felt dangerous, like saying it would jinx the whole thing. "I don't know," Noah said finally. "Maybe." "You should find out," Leo said, twirling pasta on his fork with the confidence of someone who had never experienced romantic anxiety. "It's not that simple." "Why not?" "Because it's complicated." That's what adults always say when they don't want to explain things. Noah laughed despite himself. "Fair point." They finished dinner and Noah did the dishes while Leo sprawled on the couch with a book. The house was quiet except for the sound of running water and the distant hum of the refrigerator. It was the kind of quiet that used to make Noah feel lonely. But tonight it felt different, less heavy, like maybe the loneliness was starting to crack around the edges. That night, after Leo was asleep, Noah sat on the porch again with a beer he still didn't really want. Claire's house was dark except for a single light in an upstairs window. He wondered if she was thinking about their coffee date too, or if she'd already moved on to the next thing on her endless to-do list. He pulled out his phone and stared at it for a full minute before typing out a message. "Thanks for coffee this morning. I had a good time." He hit send before he could talk himself out of it, then immediately regretted it. Too casual? Too formal? Should he have added something else? His phone buzzed 30 seconds later. "Me too. Let's do it again soon." Noah stared at the screen, his heart doing something stupid in his chest. "Yeah, I'd like that." He set the phone down and took a sip of beer, feeling like he'd just crossed some invisible line he hadn't known was there. The next few weeks unfolded in a way that felt almost normal, except nothing about it was normal for Noah. He and Claire started spending more time together, not in any formal, planned-out way, but in the quiet, accidental way that neighbors do when they stop pretending they don't notice each other. She'd wave him over when she was unloading groceries, and he'd help carry bags to her kitchen. He'd be outside with Leo, tossing a football in the yard, and she'd come out to watch, leaning against the fence with her arms crossed and a small smile on her face. They'd talk. About small things, mostly. The weather, the best pizza place in town, the bizarre drama unfolding at the neighborhood association meetings. Neither of them ever attended. But sometimes the conversations went deeper, slipping into the kind of honesty that only happens when you're not trying too hard. One evening, Noah was on his porch trying to assemble a bookshelf he'd bought on sale, a task that was proving far more complicated than the box had promised, when Claire walked over with 2 beers. "You look like you could use this," she said, holding one out. Noah looked up, wiping sweat off his forehead. "Is it that obvious?" "You've been swearing at that thing for 20 minutes. It's defective. It's IKEA. They're all defective." She sat down on the porch steps and opened her own beer. "Need help?" "Only if you're secretly an engineer." I'm not, but I'm good at reading instructions, which is apparently more than you can say. Noah laughed and handed her the crumpled manual. Have at it. They worked together for the next hour, Claire reading out steps while Noah fumbled with screws and wooden panels that refused to fit together the way the diagram suggested. It was frustrating and absurd and weirdly comfortable. At some point, Leo wandered out to watch, offering commentary that ranged from helpful to completely baffling. You're doing it wrong, Leo announced. Thanks, bud. Super helpful. You have to turn it the other way. I am turning it the other way. No, the other way. Claire laughed, and the sound cut through Noah's frustration like a lifeline. He looked at her, sitting cross-legged on his porch, with her hair falling out of its ponytail and grease smudged on her cheek, and felt something shift inside him. This wasn't just attraction. This was something bigger, something that scared him more than he wanted to admit. By the time they finished, the bookshelf was standing, crooked but standing, and the sun had dipped below the horizon, casting everything in shades of orange and pink. Thanks, Noah said, stepping back to admire their work. I definitely would have given up without you. You would have figured it out, Claire said. Eventually. Maybe. But it would have taken twice as long and involved a lot more swearing. She smiled, brushing dust off her jeans. Anytime. There was a pause, the kind that felt loaded with things neither of them knew how to say. Hey, Noah said, before he could stop himself. Do you want to grab dinner sometime? Like an actual dinner? Not just accidental porch construction? Claire looked at him, and for a second he thought she might say no. But then she nodded, her expression softening. Yeah, I'd like that. Yeah? Yeah. Noah felt like he'd just won something, though he wasn't sure what. They went out the following Saturday. Nothing fancy, just a small seafood place near the water that locals liked and tourists usually missed. The kind of place with plastic tablecloths and a chalkboard menu and waiters who called you hun, whether you liked it or not. Claire showed up in jeans and a simple gray sweater, her hair down, her makeup minimal. She looked beautiful in a way that made Noah's chest ache. But more than that, she looked real. Not like the polished, untouchable woman he'd watched from a distance for months, but like someone who was tired and trying, and maybe a little bit nervous too. They ordered fried shrimp and fish tacos and a basket of fries that neither of them needed. The conversation started light. Work, Leo, the questionable decision to paint the town library neon green, but somewhere between the appetizers and the main course, it shifted. Can I ask you something? Claire said, picking at her napkin. Sure. Why did you really move here? Noah set down his fork. I told you, I needed a reset. I know, but that's the safe answer. What's the real one? He should have deflected, changed the subject, made a joke. But Claire was looking at him with an openness that demanded honesty, and Noah was tired of hiding. Leo's mom left when he was 3, Noah said quietly. Just walked out one day. No warning, no explanation. She called a few weeks later to say she couldn't do it anymore. The marriage, the kid, the life we'd built. She wanted out. Claire didn't say anything, but her expression shifted, softening in a way that made Noah's throat tighten. I tried to hold it together, he continued. Kept working, kept taking care of Leo, kept pretending everything was fine. But it wasn't. The city felt like a trap. Every corner reminded me of her, of what we'd lost. I couldn't breathe. So I packed us up and moved here thinking maybe a fresh start would help. Did it? Not the way I hoped. I'm still tired all the time, still overwhelmed, still wondering if I'm screwing Leo up by doing this alone. You're not, Claire said firmly. How do you know? Because he's happy, and he loves you. That's not nothing, Noah. Noah swallowed hard, fighting the urge to look away. Thanks. They sat in silence for a moment, the noise of the restaurant fading into the background. What about you? Noah asked. What's your story? Claire hesitated, her fingers drumming against the edge of the table. I don't have one as dramatic as yours. I'm not looking for drama. I'm just looking for the truth. She exhaled slowly. I moved here because I thought a smaller town would make everything easier, simpler. I was burning out in the city, working 80-hour weeks, chasing promotions, trying to prove I was good enough. And I was. I am. But it never felt like enough. There was always another client, another deadline, another expectation. So you left? Not exactly. I took a remote position, moved here, Told myself I'd slow down. But I didn't. I just brought the chaos with me. Now I work from home instead of an office, but it's the same grind, same pressure, same loneliness. Why don't you stop? Because I don't know what else to do, Claire admitted. This is who I've been for so long. The competent one, the reliable one, the one who has it all together. If I stop, what's left? Noah understood that more than she knew. You're more than your job, he said. So are you. They looked at each other across the table, two people who'd been pretending for too long, and something unspoken passed between them. Not a solution, not a fix, but an acknowledgement. We see each other. We understand. The rest of the dinner was easier after that. They laughed about bad movies they'd seen, argued about whether pineapple belonged on pizza, and made fun of the overly enthusiastic waiter who kept checking in every 5 minutes. When they left, the air outside was cool and salt-tinged, the kind of night that made you want to walk instead of drive. So they did, wandering along the waterfront with no real destination, just the rhythm of their footsteps and the sound of the waves in the background. I'm glad you tackled me at the beach, Claire said suddenly. Noah laughed. That's a sentence I never thought I'd hear. I'm serious. If you hadn't, we'd probably still be polite strangers waving from driveways. Would that be so bad? Yeah, Claire said softly. It would. Noah stopped walking and Claire stopped too, turning to face him. I'm not good at this, Noah said. The whole connection thing. I've been on my own for so long, I don't know how to let someone in. I'm not good at it either, Claire admitted. I'm better at keeping people at a distance. So what do we do? I don't know, Claire said, but I think we figure it out together. Noah reached for her hand and she let him take it. Her fingers were cold, but they curled around his like they belonged there. They stood there for a long moment, the pier stretching out behind them, the town quiet and dark except for the streetlights and the faint glow of the moon on the water. Then Noah kissed her. It wasn't planned, it wasn't smooth, it was clumsy and tentative, the kind of first kiss that happens when two people are terrified of screwing it up. But it was real. And when Claire kissed him back, her hand tightening around his, Noah felt something he hadn't felt in years. He felt like he wasn't alone anymore. When they finally pulled apart, Claire was smiling, a real, unguarded smile that made Noah's chest ache. That was nice, she said. Yeah? Yeah. They walked back to their houses in comfortable silence, hands still linked, neither of them ready to let go. When they reached Claire's driveway, she turned to him, her expression soft but serious. I don't want to rush this. I don't want to mess it up. Me neither, Noah said. So we take it slow? Slow sounds good. Claire nodded, then leaned in and kissed him again, quick and sweet. Good night, Noah. Good night. He watched her disappear inside, then stood there for a moment, trying to process what had just happened. When he finally went inside, Leo was on the couch, supposedly asleep, but clearly faking it. I know you're awake, Noah said. Leo sat up, grinning. Did you kiss her? Go to bed. You totally did. Leo. Fine, fine. Leo stood up, stretching dramatically. But I'm happy for you, Dad. Noah ruffled his son's hair, his throat tight. Thanks, bud. You deserve to be happy. Noah didn't know what to say to that, so he just pulled Leo into a hug and held on a little longer than usual. After Leo was in bed, for real this time, Noah sat on the couch and let himself feel it. The fear, the hope, the terrifying possibility that maybe this could actually work. He didn't have answers. He didn't have a plan. But for the first time in a long time, he had something worth holding on to. Over the next few weeks, Noah and Claire settled into something that resembled a relationship. Though neither of them used that word yet, it was easier not to label it, easier to just let it unfold without the weight of expectations pressing down on them. Claire started coming over more often. She'd show up after work with takeout or a bottle of wine, kicking off her shoes in the entryway like she'd been doing it for years. Leo adored her, mostly because she didn't treat him like a kid, but like a tiny person with opinions worth hearing. She'd ask him about school, about his friends, about the elaborate fantasy world he'd been building with action figures and cardboard boxes. So in this world, the dinosaurs can talk? Claire asked one evening, sitting cross-legged on the living room floor while Leo explained the rules of his imaginary universe. Only some of them, Leo said seriously. The T-Rexes can't because their arms are too short to use sign language. That's actually a solid point. I know. I thought about it a lot. Noah watched from the kitchen, where he was reheating leftover pizza, and felt something warm and unfamiliar settle in his chest. This was what he'd been missing. Not perfection, not some idealized version of family, but this. Messy, imperfect, real. But as much as things were good, they were also complicated. Noah's work was relentless. He'd pick up a new project thinking he could handle it, then end up buried under revisions and scope creep and clients who changed their minds every 5 minutes. There were nights when he'd stay up until 2 in the morning, hunched over his laptop, his eyes burning and his brain too fried to think straight. Claire noticed. "You need to sleep," she said one night, finding him at the dining table with his third cup of coffee and a design mock-up that looked worse with every iteration. "I will, after I finish this." "Noah, I'm fine." "You're not fine. You look like you're about to collapse." "I can't collapse. I have a deadline." Claire sat down across from him, her expression serious. "When's the last time you said no to a project?" Noah didn't answer. "That's what I thought." She closed his laptop, ignoring his protest. "You can't keep doing this. You're going to burn out." "I don't have a choice. If I don't work, we don't eat." "There's always a choice. You're just scared to make it." Noah bristled. "That's easy for you to say. You're not raising a kid on your own." The words came out harsher than he intended, and he saw Claire flinch. "You're right," she said quietly. "I don't know what that's like. But I do know what it's like to work yourself into the ground because you think that's the only option. And I know where that leads. It doesn't end well, Noah." He wanted to argue, to push back, but he was too tired. So he just sat there, staring at his closed laptop, feeling the weight of everything pressing down on him. Claire reached across the table and took his hand. "I'm not trying to fix you. I'm just trying to help." "I know," Noah said. "I'm sorry. I'm just tired." "I know." She stayed with him until he finally gave up and went to bed, too exhausted to do anything but collapse on top of the covers. When he woke up the next morning, there was a note on the kitchen counter in Claire's handwriting. "You don't have to do this alone anymore." Noah read it 3 times, his chest tight, and tucked it into his wallet. But things weren't easy for Claire either. Noah started noticing the cracks in her carefully maintained exterior, the way she'd check her phone constantly, her jaw tightening every time a new email came through. The way she'd cancel plans at the last minute because a client needed something urgently, her apologies rushed and strained. One night, Noah showed up at her door unannounced, holding a pizza and a 6-pack of beer. "I didn't order that," Claire said, but she stepped aside to let him in. "I know, but you've been working nonstop for 3 days and I figured you could use a break." "I can't. I have a presentation tomorrow." "You can take an hour." "Noah." "Claire." He set the pizza on her counter and looked at her. Really looked at her. She was pale, her eyes shadowed, her usual polish frayed at the edges. "When's the last time you ate something that wasn't coffee?" She didn't answer. "That's what I thought." He grabbed 2 plates from her cabinet and opened the pizza box. "Sit. I really need to finish this." "You need to eat. The presentation can wait an hour." She looked like she wanted to argue, but instead she sighed and sat down at the counter. Noah handed her a slice, and she took a bite, closing her eyes like it was the best thing she'd tasted in days. "You're stubborn," she said after a moment. Pot, kettle. Fair. They ate in silence for a while, the tension in the room slowly easing. "Why do you do this to yourself?" Noah asked finally. "Do what?" "Work like this. Like you're trying to prove something." Claire set down her pizza, her expression guarded. "Because I am." "To who?" "To everyone. To myself." "I don't know." She exhaled slowly. "I've spent my entire adult life being the person people can count on, the one who delivers, who doesn't mess up, who has it together. If I stop, if I let myself slow down, what happens? What if I'm not good enough anymore?" "You're already good enough," Noah said. "You don't have to kill yourself to prove it." "You sound like a therapist." "I sound like someone who cares about you." Claire looked at him, and for a second, Noah saw the vulnerability she usually kept locked away. "I don't know how to stop." "Then let me help you figure it out." She didn't say anything, but she reached across the counter and took his hand, holding on like she was afraid to let go. They stayed like that for a long time, Two people who were too tired and too scared and too stubborn for their own good, but who were trying, really trying, to be better. The weeks blurred together after that. Noah and Claire kept showing up for each other in small, quiet ways. She'd bring him lunch when she knew he was drowning in work. He'd sit with her while she prepped for presentations, not saying much, just being there. It wasn't grand or romantic in the way movies made it look. It was messy and imperfect, and sometimes frustrating. But it was real. And slowly, so slowly Noah almost didn't notice, the loneliness started to lift. He wasn't doing this alone anymore. Neither was she. And for the first time in years, that felt like enough. One Saturday afternoon, Noah and Claire took Leo to the boardwalk. It was crowded with weekend tourists and locals enjoying the unseasonably warm weather. Leo ran ahead, weaving between families and stopping to stare at street performers, while Noah and Claire followed at a slower pace, their hands brushing every few steps. "He's got so much energy," Claire said, watching Leo sprint toward a booth selling overpriced carnival games. "Tell me about it. I don't know where he gets it." "Definitely not from you," Noah laughed. Rude, but accurate. They spent the afternoon wandering, eating terrible fried food and letting Leo drag them from booth to booth. At one point, he convinced Noah to try winning a stuffed bear at a ring toss game, which went about as well as expected. "You're terrible at this," Claire observed as Noah missed for the 5th time. "Thanks for the support." "Just stating facts." Noah finally gave up and bought the bear outright, much to Leo's delight. As the sun started to set, they found a spot on the pier and sat down, legs dangling over the edge. Leo was a few feet away, crouched down and peering at something in the water. "This is nice," Claire said quietly. "Yeah," Noah agreed. "It is." She leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder, and Noah felt that same warm, terrifying feeling from before. He was falling for her, hard, and that scared him more than he wanted to admit. Because what if it didn't work out? What if he screwed it up? What if she realized he was too much, too messy, too tired, too broken? "Hey," Claire said, like she could hear his thoughts. "Stop overthinking." "I'm not." "You are. I can tell." Noah exhaled. "How do you do that?" "Do what?" "Read me like that." "Because I know you," Claire said simply. "And because I do the same thing." They sat there as the sky turned pink and orange, the waves crashing below them. And for a moment, Noah let himself believe that maybe this could work. Maybe they didn't have to be perfect. Maybe they just had to keep showing up, keep trying, keep choosing each other even when it was hard. "Dad," Leo called, running over with something cupped in his hands. "Look what I found." It was a sand dollar, small and intact, and impossibly delicate. "That's awesome, bud," Noah said. Leo handed it to Claire. "You can keep it." Claire looked surprised. "Really?" "Yeah, you're nice, and you make my dad smile." Noah's chest tightened, and he saw Claire's eyes get a little shiny. "Thank you, Leo," she said softly. "I'll keep it safe." Leo beamed and ran off again, leaving Noah and Claire sitting there with a fragile piece of the ocean between them. "Your kid is pretty great," Claire said, her voice thick. "Yeah," Noah said. "He is." She looked at him, and in her eyes, Noah saw everything he'd been too scared to name. Hope, fear, the terrifying possibility of something real. "I'm glad we're doing this," Claire said. "Me too." And as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of fire and gold, Noah let himself believe it. Not just hope for it, but believe it. This was real. This was theirs. And maybe, just maybe, it was going to be okay. The sand dollar sat on Claire's kitchen windowsill for weeks after that day on the pier, catching the morning light in a way that made it look almost translucent. Noah noticed it every time he came over, this small, fragile thing that his son had given her, and it made something in his chest tighten every single time. Things between them had shifted after that afternoon. Not dramatically, not in some explosive way, but in the quiet, steady manner of two people who were starting to understand that what they had wasn't temporary. It was something they were building, piece by piece, without a blueprint or any guarantee it wouldn't fall apart. But the fear was always there, lurking just beneath the surface. Noah felt it most acutely on the nights when he couldn't sleep, when the weight of everything pressed down on him and he'd lie awake wondering how long this could last. How long before Claire realized she'd signed up for more than she bargained for? How long before the exhaustion and the chaos of his life became too much? He didn't talk about it. Neither did she. But he could see it in her eyes sometimes, that same flicker of uncertainty, that same question hanging in the air between them. What are we doing? And where is this going? It came to a head on a Tuesday night in late October. Noah had spent the entire day wrestling with a particularly difficult client, the kind who wanted everything yesterday and changed their mind every 5 minutes. By the time he picked Leo up from school, his patience was worn to nothing, his head pounding, his jaw clenched so tight it hurt. Leo was in a mood too. He'd gotten in trouble at recess for pushing another kid, and the teacher had sent home a note that Noah had read 3 times, each reading making him feel more like a failure. "I didn't push him that hard," Leo insisted from the back seat as they drove home. "That's not the point. He was being mean to Emma." "So you pushed him?" "I was helping her." "By hurting someone else?" Leo crossed his arms, his face scrunched up in that stubborn way he got when he knew he was wrong but didn't want to admit it. "You always say to stand up for people." "Yeah, with words, Leo, not by shoving kids into the dirt. You don't understand." "I understand that you got in trouble." Again. The word again hung there, sharp and accusing, and Noah immediately regretted it. Leo went quiet, staring out the window, and Noah felt like the worst parent on the planet. When they got home, Leo went straight to his room and slammed the door. Noah stood in the hallway for a moment, debating whether to follow him or give him space. He chose space, mostly because he didn't trust himself not to make it worse. He went to the kitchen and opened his laptop, intending to at least make a dent in the project he'd been avoiding. But his brain wouldn't cooperate. The words on the screen blurred together. The design mock-ups looked terrible, no matter how many times he adjusted them, and every notification that popped up felt like another demand he couldn't meet. His phone buzzed. A text from Claire. "How's your day?" Noah stared at it for a long moment, then typed back. "Rough." 3 dots appeared immediately. "Want to talk about it?" Noah's first instinct was to say no, to keep it to himself, to not burden her with the mess that was his life today. But something stopped him. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was the memory of her voice saying, "You don't have to do this alone anymore." Maybe it was just that he was tired of pretending he had it together when he clearly didn't. "Yeah. Can you come over?" "On my way." She showed up 20 minutes later, still in her work clothes, her hair pulled back in a ponytail that had come half undone. She took one look at Noah's face and didn't ask questions. She just walked into the kitchen, opened the fridge, and pulled out 2 beers. "Leo asleep?" she asked, handing him one. "No, in his room. We had a fight." "About?" "He pushed a kid at school." Claire sat down at the table. "Why'd he push him?" "The kid was being mean to a girl in his class." Leo thought he was helping. "That's kind of sweet, actually." "It's also assault. It's 7-year-old playground justice. There's a difference." Noah took a long drink of beer, then set the bottle down harder than he meant to. "I don't know what I'm doing, Claire. I don't know how to handle this. Every time I think I've got it figured out, something else goes wrong, and I'm just—" He stopped, his throat tight. "I'm just tired." "I know, and I feel like I'm failing him, like no matter what I do, it's not enough. He needs more than I can give him." Claire reached across the table and took his hand. "You're not failing him, Noah." "How do you know?" "Because he's a good kid. He's kind and smart, and he sticks up for people. That doesn't happen by accident. That comes from you." Noah wanted to believe her, but the doubt was so loud, so persistent, that it drowned out everything else. "I'm scared," he admitted quietly. "I'm scared that I'm screwing this up. All of it. Leo, work, us." "You're not screwing us up." "Not yet. But what happens when you realize this is too much? When you figure out that I'm just a mess pretending to have his life together?" Claire's expression shifted, something sharp and defensive flashing across her face. "You think I don't know that already?" Noah blinked. "What? You think I don't see the mess, Noah? You think I don't know what I'm getting into?" She pulled her hand back, her voice rising slightly. "I'm not some naive person who thinks relationships are easy. I know what it's like to be overwhelmed. I know what it's like to feel like you're drowning, and I'm still here. For now." "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means that sooner or later you're going to get tired of this, of me, of all the chaos that comes with being in my life. And when that happens what? I'm just going to walk away?" Claire stood up, her chair scraping against the floor. Is that what you think of me? I don't know what to think, Noah said, standing too. I've been left before, Claire. I know how this goes. I'm not her. I know that. Do you? Because it sounds like you're expecting me to bail the second things get hard. I'm not expecting it. I'm just... Noah ran a hand through his hair, frustration and fear tangling together in his chest. I'm just trying to protect myself and Leo. Because if this falls apart, it's not just me who gets hurt. Claire's face softened, but there was hurt there too. You think I don't know that? You think I haven't thought about what it means to be part of his life? I care about Leo, Noah. I care about you, but I can't keep proving that over and over again just because you're scared. The words hit like a punch, because she was right. He was scared, terrified. And he was using that fear as a weapon, pushing her away before she could leave on her own. I'm sorry, Noah said, his voice breaking. I don't mean to do that. I don't know how to let someone in without being afraid they're going to leave. Claire crossed her arms, her expression torn between anger and something that looked like heartbreak. I can't fix that for you, Noah. That's something you have to figure out. I know. Do you? Yes. He stepped closer, desperate for her to understand. I know I'm being unfair. I know I'm projecting, but I don't know how to stop. I don't know how to trust this without being scared it's going to disappear. Claire looked at him for a long moment, and Noah saw the exhaustion in her eyes, the weight she was carrying too. She wasn't perfect either. She was just as broken, just as scared, and they were both trying to hold each other up while barely keeping themselves upright. I'm scared too, she said finally, her voice quieter now. I'm terrified that I'm going to mess this up, that I'm going to let you down, that I'm going to fail at being what you and Leo need, but I'm still here, Noah. I'm still trying. I know. Then let me. Noah closed the distance between them and pulled her into his arms. She resisted for half a second, then melted against him, her face pressed into his shoulder. They stood there in the middle of the kitchen, holding on to each other like they were both afraid to let go. I'm sorry, Noah whispered into her hair. I'm sorry for pushing you away. I'm sorry for not understanding how hard this is for you, Claire said, her voice muffled. You don't have to apologize. Yes, I do. We both do. This is hard for both of us. They stayed like that until Noah's phone buzzed on the table, breaking the moment. He pulled back reluctantly and glanced at the screen. A text from Leo's teacher asking if they could schedule a meeting to discuss his behavior. Noah sighed. It never stops. What? The problems, the stress. It just keeps coming. Claire took his face in her hands, forcing him to look at her. Then we deal with it, together, one thing at a time. What if it's too much? Then we'll figure that out too. Noah wanted to argue, to list all the ways this could go wrong, but he was too tired. So he just nodded and kissed her, soft and brief, like a promise he wasn't sure he could keep, but wanted to try anyway. The next few weeks were harder than Noah expected. The teacher meeting went poorly. Leo was struggling more than Noah had realized, acting out in class, having trouble focusing, clearly dealing with emotions he didn't know how to process. The school recommended counseling, which meant more appointments, more expenses, more things Noah had to juggle on top of everything else. Work got worse too. 2 clients pulled out at the last minute, leaving Noah scrambling to replace the income. He started taking on projects he normally would have turned down, just to keep the bills paid. The quality of his work suffered, and he could feel himself slipping back into the burnout he'd been trying to escape. Claire noticed. She always noticed. You're working too much again, she said one night, finding him at the table at 11 o'clock, his eyes bloodshot and his hands cramping from hours at the keyboard. I have to. No, you don't. Claire, I can't afford to turn down work right now. Leo's counseling isn't cheap, and I still have to pay rent and keep food on the table, and I know, but you're going to make yourself sick. I'm fine. You're not. She sat down across from him, her expression serious. I want to help. You can't. Let me finish. She took a breath. I know you don't want to feel like you're relying on me. I know you want to handle this yourself. But if we're doing this, if we're actually trying to build something together, then you have to let me be part of it. The hard parts, too. Noah stared at her. What are you saying? I'm saying I want to help with Leo's counseling, and I want to help with the bills if you need it. Not because I think you can't handle it, but because we're in this together now. Your problems are my problems. I can't ask you to do that. You're not asking, I'm offering. It's too much. Says who? Noah didn't have an answer to that. Claire leaned forward, her eyes intense. I'm not trying to save you, Noah. I'm trying to be your partner. There's a difference. And if you keep pushing me away every time things get hard, we're never going to make it. The words stung because they were true. Noah had been so focused on protecting himself, on not being a burden, that he'd been shutting her out. And that wasn't fair to either of them. Okay, he said finally. Okay? Yeah, okay, I'll let you help. Claire smiled, and it was the first real smile he'd seen from her in days. Good, because you're stuck with me now. Is that a threat or a promise? Both. Things didn't magically get better after that conversation, but they did get easier. Claire started coming over on Leo's counseling days, sitting with him while Noah met with the therapist, giving Leo someone else to talk to when the sessions left him feeling raw and confused. She helped with groceries when Noah's bank account hit dangerously low, brushing off his protests with a wave of her hand. I'll buy groceries this week. You can buy them next week, she said simply. It's not charity. It's how this works. Slowly, Noah started to let go of the need to do everything alone. It was uncomfortable at first, like learning to walk with a limp he'd trained himself not to notice. But the more he leaned on Claire, the more he realized she wasn't going to buckle under the weight. She was stronger than he'd given her credit for, and she wasn't going anywhere. But Claire was struggling too, and it took Noah longer than it should have to notice. He'd been so wrapped up in his own chaos that he'd missed the signs. The way she'd stopped sleeping well, her eyes shadowed and distant. The way she'd snap at small things, then apologize immediately, her frustration directed at herself more than anyone else. The way she'd cancel plans at the last minute, citing work emergencies that seemed to happen more and more frequently. It all came crashing down on a Friday night in early November. Noah had planned to cook dinner. Nothing fancy, just pasta and garlic bread. But when Claire didn't show up at the time they'd agreed on, he started to worry. He texted her, got no response, and finally walked over to her house. The lights were on, but when he knocked, she didn't answer. He tried the door. It was unlocked. Claire, he called, stepping inside. He found her in the living room, sitting on the floor with her laptop open and papers spread around her like debris from a crash. She was crying, not the kind of crying that was loud and cathartic, but the quiet, exhausted kind that came when you'd been holding it in for too long. Hey, Noah said softly, kneeling down beside her. What's going on? I can't do this anymore, Claire said, her voice ragged. Can't do what? Any of it. Work. This life. Pretending I have it together when I clearly don't. Noah looked at the papers scattered around her. Contracts, emails, a proposal that looked half-finished and abandoned. What happened? I lost a client. A big one. They said my work wasn't up to standard, that I missed deadlines, that I wasn't responsive enough. She laughed, bitter and broken. And they're right. I've been dropping the ball for weeks. I'm so tired, Noah. I'm so tired I can't think straight, and I don't know how to fix it. Noah sat down beside her, pulling her into his arms. She collapsed against him, her whole body shaking with the force of trying not to fall apart. It's okay, he whispered. It's okay to not be okay. It's not okay. I'm supposed to have it together. That's who I am. That's all I know how to be. No, Noah said firmly. That's who you think you have to be. But you don't. Not with me. Claire pulled back, her face blotchy and tear-streaked. I don't know how to be anything else. Then let me show you. He stayed with her that night, helping her pack away the work she couldn't finish, making her tea she didn't drink, sitting with her while she cried until there was nothing left. And when she finally fell asleep on the couch, exhausted and drained, Noah stayed awake beside her, keeping watch like he could protect her from the weight of the world she'd been carrying alone for too long. The next morning, Claire woke up disoriented and embarrassed. She tried to brush it off, to make light of it, but Noah didn't let her. We need to talk about this, he said. There's nothing to talk about. I had a bad night. It happens. It's more than that. You're burning out, Claire, and you've been burning out for a while. She looked away, her jaw tight. I'll handle it. How? By working yourself into the ground until you collapse? I don't have a choice. Yes, you do. You just don't want to make it. Claire's eyes flashed. You don't understand. I understand more than you think. I've been where you are, and I know how it ends if you don't change something. So what do you want me to do? Quit my job? Stop working? Just give up everything I've built? I want you to take care of yourself. I want you to stop acting like your worth is tied to how much you can produce. I want you to admit that you're human and you have limits. That's easy for you to say? No, Noah said, his voice sharper than he intended. It's not. It's the hardest thing I've ever had to learn, and I'm still learning it. But I can't watch you destroy yourself, Claire. I can't. She stared at him, and for a moment he thought she was going to yell, but instead she just crumpled, her defenses finally giving way. I don't know how to stop, she whispered. Then let me help you. They sat together on her couch, the morning light filtering through the windows. And for the first time since they'd met, Claire let herself be completely vulnerable. She told him about the pressure she'd been under for years, the impossible standards she'd set for herself, the fear that if she slowed down, she'd lose everything she'd worked for. Noah listened, and when she was done, he told her the truth. You won't lose everything, but you might lose yourself, and that's worse. Claire nodded, tears streaming down her face. I'm scared. I know, me too. What do we do? We figure it out, Noah said. Together. It wasn't a solution, it wasn't a fix, but it was a start. Over the next few days, Claire started making changes. Small ones at first, declining projects that didn't align with her values, setting boundaries with clients who demanded too much, carving out time for herself that wasn't dictated by work. It was hard. She fought it every step of the way, her instinct to say yes and keep pushing, battling against the reality that she couldn't keep going like this. But Noah was there, and so was Leo, in his own innocent way, reminding Claire that there was more to life than deadlines and deliverables. One afternoon, the three of them went to the beach. It was cold, the kind of November cold that bit at your skin and made your nose run, but Leo insisted, and Noah didn't have the heart to say no. They walked along the shore, Leo running ahead and collecting shells, while Noah and Claire followed hand in hand. Thank you, Claire said after a while. For what? For not letting me spiral, for calling me out when I needed it, for being here. You do the same for me. I hope so. Noah squeezed her hand. You already have. They stopped walking and stood there, watching Leo chase the waves, his laughter carried on the wind. And for the first time in a long time, Noah felt like maybe they were going to be okay. Not perfect. Not without struggles. But okay. That evening, as they headed back to Noah's house, Leo looked up at Claire with the kind of seriousness only kids could pull off. Are you going to stay? He asked. Claire crouched down to his level. What do you mean? Are you going to stay with us? Like for real? Claire glanced at Noah, then back at Leo. I want to, if that's okay with you. Leo nodded, then threw his arms around her neck in a hug that was fierce and unguarded and completely genuine. Noah watched them, his chest tight with something that felt dangerously close to hope. Maybe this was real. Maybe this could last. And maybe, just maybe, they were finally figuring it out. The hug Leo gave Claire on the beach stayed with Noah long after they'd gone home that evening. He kept replaying it in his mind. The way his son had thrown his arms around her without hesitation, without fear, like he'd been waiting for permission to love her and had finally gotten it. It was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure, because Noah knew what it meant. Leo was attached now. This wasn't just about Noah and Claire anymore. It was about all three of them, and if things fell apart, it wouldn't just be Noah's heart that broke. But Claire had said she wanted to stay, and Noah had to believe she meant it. Over the next few weeks, something shifted in their dynamic. It wasn't dramatic or sudden, but it was undeniable. Claire stopped treating Noah's house like a place she visited and started treating it like a place she belonged. She kept a toothbrush in the bathroom. She had a drawer in Noah's dresser with a couple of shirts and a pair of jeans for the night she stayed over. She knew where the coffee filters were kept and which mug Leo liked to use for hot chocolate. Noah's life, which had felt chaotic and barely held together for so long, started to feel less like survival and more like something he could actually live in. But the easier things became, the more Noah felt the weight of what he hadn't told her. The parts of himself he'd kept hidden, the parts he was ashamed of, the parts he was terrified would make her see him differently. It came up one night in early December when Claire found the letter. Noah had been in the shower and Claire was looking for a phone charger in his bedroom when she accidentally knocked over a stack of papers on his nightstand. Most of it was junk. Bills he'd already paid, receipts he should have thrown away, a flyer for a pizza place that had been out of business for months. But there, at the bottom of the pile, was an envelope addressed to Noah in handwriting he hadn't seen in years. Leo's mother. Claire picked it up without thinking, then immediately set it back down when she realized what it was. But the damage was done. When Noah came out of the bathroom, toweling off his hair, he saw her standing by the nightstand, her expression carefully neutral. "I wasn't snooping," she said quickly. "I was looking for a charger and I knocked over your stuff. I'm sorry." Noah looked at the envelope still sitting there on top of the pile, and his stomach dropped. "It's fine." "Is that from her?" He didn't need to ask who she meant. "Yeah." "When did it come?" "A few months ago, before I met you." Claire hesitated, like she was trying to decide whether to push or let it go. "Have you read it?" "No." "Why not?" "Because I don't want to know what it says." Claire sat down on the edge of the bed, her hands folded in her lap. "Noah, if you don't want to talk about this, I understand. But if you do, I'm here." Noah sat down next to her, the towel still draped around his neck. He stared at the envelope like it might combust if he looked at it long enough. "She left when Leo was 3. Just walked out one day while I was at work. When I got home, she was gone. No note, no explanation, nothing. She called a few weeks later and said she couldn't do it anymore. That she felt trapped. That she needed to find herself. That being a mother wasn't what she thought it would be." "Did she ever come back?" "No. She called a few times after that asking about Leo, but she never wanted to see him, never asked to visit. She sent birthday cards for the first couple of years, and then those stopped too. And then, out of nowhere, that letter showed up." "What do you think it says?" "I don't know. Maybe she wants back in his life. Maybe she's dying and wants to make amends. Maybe she just wants to clear her conscience. I don't care. Whatever it is, it's too late." Claire reached over and took his hand. "Have you told Leo about the letter?" "No, and I'm not going to. He's finally in a good place. He's happy. I'm not going to mess that up by dragging her back into his life. What if she's trying to apologize? An apology doesn't fix what she did. She abandoned him, Claire. She chose to walk away from her own kid. You don't come back from that." Claire was quiet for a moment, her thumb tracing circles on the back of his hand. "I'm not saying you have to forgive her, or that you have to let her back in, but maybe you should at least know what she wants." "Why?" "Because not knowing is eating at you. I can see it, Noah. You say you don't care, but you do. And that letter sitting there unopened is just going to keep haunting you." Noah pulled his hand away, frustration flaring in his chest. "You don't understand. Then help me understand." She broke him, Claire. When she left, Leo cried himself to sleep every night for months. He kept asking where she was, why she didn't love him anymore, what he did wrong. And I didn't have answers. I didn't know how to explain to a 3-year-old that his mother just didn't want him. Do you know what that does to a kid? Claire's expression softened, pain flickering across her face. "I can't imagine. And now she wants to show up again after all this time? After everything we've been through? No, I'm not putting him through that." "I'm not saying you should. I'm just saying that maybe you should read it, for yourself, so you know what you're dealing with." Noah stood up, pacing to the window. "I can't." "Why not?" "Because if I read it, I'll have to feel something about it. And I don't want to feel anything about her. I want her to stay in the past where she belongs." Claire stood up too, crossing the room to stand beside him. "She's not going to stay in the past, Noah. Not if you keep holding on to this anger. It's going to keep eating at you until you deal with it." "I am dealing with it." "No, you're avoiding it. There's a difference." Noah turned to look at her, and the frustration in his chest gave way to something raw, something closer to fear. "What if reading that letter changes things? What if it makes me angrier? Or worse, what if it makes me feel sorry for her? I can't afford to feel sorry for her, Claire. I have to protect Leo." "You can protect Leo and still process your own feelings. Those things aren't mutually exclusive." "You make it sound so easy." "It's not easy, but it's necessary." Noah looked at the envelope again, sitting there on the nightstand like a bomb waiting to go off. He didn't want to deal with it. He didn't want to open that door. But Claire was right. It was already eating at him, and it would keep eating at him until he faced it. "Will you stay?" he asked quietly. When I read it? Of course. Noah picked up the envelope, his hands shaking slightly. He turned it over, looking at the return address, a city 3 states away that he'd never heard of. He slid his finger under the flap and tore it open, pulling out a single folded piece of paper. The handwriting was the same as the envelope. Neat, careful, almost apologetic in its precision. He read it once, quickly, his eyes scanning the words without really absorbing them. Then he read it again, slower this time, letting the meaning sink in. It wasn't an apology. Not really. It was an explanation, rambling and defensive and full of justifications that didn't justify anything. She talked about how hard it had been, how young she was, how unprepared she felt. She said she'd been struggling with depression, that she'd felt suffocated by the responsibility, that leaving had been the only way she could survive. She said she thought about Leo every day, that she hoped he was happy, that she understood if Noah never wanted to hear from her again, but that she wanted him to know she was sorry. At the very end, she'd written her phone number. Noah stared at it for a long time, the paper trembling in his hands. "What does it say?" Claire asked gently. "She says she's sorry, that she was depressed and didn't know how to handle it, that she thinks about him." His voice was flat, drained of emotion. She left her number. "Are you going to call her?" "I don't know." "Do you want to?" "No, yes, I don't know." Noah crumpled the letter in his fist, then smoothed it out again. "Part of me wants to call her just to yell at her, to tell her how much she hurt him, how much she hurt me. But what's the point? It won't change anything. Maybe it would help you move on. Or maybe it would just rip open old wounds." Claire took the letter from his hands and set it on the nightstand. Then she wrapped her arms around him, pulling him close. "You don't have to decide tonight. You don't have to decide at all if you don't want to. But whatever you choose, I'm here." Noah buried his face in her shoulder, his chest tight with emotions he didn't know how to name. Anger, grief, relief, fear. They all tangled together, choking him, and for a moment he couldn't breathe. "I don't want her back in his life," he whispered. "I can't let her hurt him again." "Then you won't. But that doesn't mean you can't acknowledge what she did to you. You're allowed to be hurt by this too, Noah." He pulled back, looking at her. "When did you get so wise?" "I'm not wise. I'm just trying to help." "You are helping." They stood there for a moment, holding each other, and Noah felt the weight of the letter lift just a little. Not gone, but lighter, manageable. That night, after Claire had gone home and Leo was asleep, Noah sat on the porch with the letter in his hand. He read it one more time, then folded it up and put it back in the envelope. He didn't throw it away, but he didn't call the number either. He just set it aside and tried to let it go. The weeks leading up to the fundraiser felt like they passed in fast forward. Work picked up for both of them, the holidays loomed on the horizon, and Leo's counseling sessions started showing real progress. He was calmer at school, less reactive, better at expressing his feelings. Noah could see the change, and it filled him with a kind of cautious hope he hadn't felt in months. Claire was changing too. She'd cut back on her client load, turned down projects that didn't align with what she actually wanted to do, and started sleeping through the night for the first time in years. She looked lighter somehow, less weighed down by the armor she'd been wearing for so long. They were building something. Slowly, imperfectly, but building it nonetheless. And then the invitation came. It was for the annual Coastal Preservation Fundraiser, a fancy event held on the pier every December to raise money for environmental projects. Noah had heard about it but never paid much attention. It wasn't the kind of thing he'd ever have been invited to. But Claire was, and she asked him to go with her. "It's formal," she warned, holding up the invitation like a disclaimer. "Like suit and tie formal. And there's going to be a lot of people I work with. It might be boring." "Are you trying to talk me out of going?" "No, I just want you to know what you're getting into." "I can handle boring. Can you handle schmoozing with corporate types who want to talk about market strategies and brand positioning?" Noah grimaced. "That does sound terrible." Claire laughed. "I know, but I'd really like you to come, if you want to." "Do I have to wear a tie?" "Yes." "Then I'm in." She smiled, and Noah felt that familiar warmth in his chest. "Thank you." The night of the fundraiser, Noah stood in front of the bathroom mirror, struggling with his tie for the third time. He'd watched a YouTube tutorial, but his fingers refused to cooperate, and the knot kept coming out lopsided. Dad, you look weird, Leo said from the doorway. Thanks, bud. Real confidence booster. Why are you so dressed up? I'm going to a fancy party with Claire. Leo tilted his head. Are you nervous? A little? Why? Because I don't really fit in at fancy parties. Claire likes you. That's all that matters. Noah looked at his son, standing there in his dinosaur pajamas, with the kind of simple wisdom that only kids possessed. You're right. I know. Noah finally gave up on the tie and left it slightly crooked. It was good enough. He kissed Leo goodnight, reminded Dave of the bedtime routine, and headed next door to pick up Claire. When she opened the door, Noah forgot how to breathe. She was wearing a dark blue dress that was simple but stunning, her hair pulled back in a way that showed off her shoulders, her makeup understated but flawless. She looked like someone who belonged at fancy parties, someone confident and self-assured and completely out of his league. You're staring, Claire said, a small smile playing at her lips. Sorry, you look incredible. Thank you. You cleaned up pretty well yourself. She reached up and adjusted his tie, straightening it with practiced ease. There, perfect. I feel like a fraud. You're not. You're just out of your comfort zone. Welcome to my world. They drove to the pier in Claire's car, and the closer they got, the more Noah's anxiety ramped up. He could see the lights strung along the dock, hear the faint sound of music drifting over the water. There were people in suits and dresses milling around the entrance, holding wine glasses and laughing in that polished, performative way people did at events like this. Last chance to bail, Claire said as she pulled into the parking lot. Not a chance. She smiled and squeezed his hand. Thank you for doing this. I haven't done anything yet. You're here. That's enough. The event was exactly as boring as Claire had warned. There were speeches about conservation efforts, a silent auction for things Noah couldn't afford, and endless small talk with people whose names he forgot the moment they introduced themselves. Claire navigated it all with ease, slipping into her professional persona like she was putting on a coat. She smiled, laughed at the right moments, asked intelligent questions, and made everyone around her feel important. Noah tried to keep up, but mostly he just felt out of place. At one point, they were cornered by a couple Claire knew from work, a husband and wife team who ran some kind of consulting firm. They were nice enough, but they talked exclusively about business metrics and quarterly projections, and Noah had nothing to contribute. He stood there, nodding at the appropriate times, sipping a glass of wine he didn't really want, and counting down the minutes until they could leave. So what do you do, Noah? The wife asked, turning her attention to him with the kind of polite interest that felt obligatory. I'm a freelance graphic designer. Oh, how interesting. What kind of clients do you work with? Mostly small businesses, startups, local stuff. That must be challenging in today's market. It is. The conversation died there, and Noah felt the weight of their judgment, even if they were too polite to voice it. He wasn't successful enough, impressive enough, interesting enough. He was just a guy who scraped by doing logo designs for coffee shops and yoga studios. Claire must have sensed his discomfort because she smoothly redirected the conversation back to herself, giving Noah space to retreat into the background. When they finally escaped, Noah let out a long breath. That was painful. I know. I'm sorry. Don't apologize. You warned me. They wandered toward the edge of the pier, away from the crowd, and stood looking out at the water. The moon was bright, casting silver light across the waves, and for the first time all night, Noah felt like he could breathe. I don't belong here, he said quietly. Neither do I, Claire said. Noah looked at her surprised. You fit in perfectly. I'm good at pretending, but I hate these things. I always have. She leaned against the railing, her expression thoughtful. This whole world, the networking, the politics, the constant performance, it's exhausting. I used to think I wanted it, that this was success, but now I'm not so sure. What do you want? Claire turned to look at him, and there was something vulnerable in her eyes. I want to feel like I'm living my life, not just going through the motions. I want to wake up and not dread the day ahead. I want to spend time with people I actually care about instead of people I'm supposed to impress. She paused, then added softly, I want what you have with Leo, that kind of connection, that kind of purpose. Noah's chest tightened. You think I have purpose? Of course you do. You're raising an incredible kid. You're building a life that matters. That's more than most of these people can say. I'm barely holding it together most days. So am I. But at least you're doing it for something real. They stood there in silence for a moment, the sound of the party fading into the background. I'm glad you're here, Claire said finally. Me too. She reached for his hand, lacing her fingers through his. Can I tell you something? Always. That day at the beach, when you knocked me into the water, I thought you were the most awkward, ridiculous person I'd ever met. Noah laughed. Thanks. But then you apologized about 50 times, and you looked so mortified, and I thought this guy actually cares. He's not trying to be smooth or impressive. He's just trying to be decent. And that was the first time in a long time that I'd met someone who felt real. Noah didn't know what to say to that, so he just squeezed her hand. I was so lonely before you, Claire continued, her voice soft. I didn't even realize how lonely I was until I wasn't anymore. And I know we're both a mess. I know we're figuring this out as we go, but I don't want to go back to the way things were before. I don't want to be that person who's too busy, too closed off, too scared to let anyone in. You're not that person anymore. I'm trying not to be. Noah turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. I need to tell you something too. Okay. I've been scared this whole time. Scared that I'm not enough for you, that you're going to wake up one day and realize you could do better, that this is all going to fall apart and I'll be back where I started, alone and drowning and wondering what I did wrong. Noah, let me finish. He took a breath. But tonight, standing here with you, I realized something. I don't want to be scared anymore. I don't want to keep waiting for the other shoe to drop. I want to believe that this is real, that we're real. And I want to stop protecting myself from something that hasn't even happened yet. Claire's eyes were shining, and Noah couldn't tell if it was the moonlight or if she was crying. I'm falling in love with you, he said, the words coming out raw and unsteady. I've been falling for a while now, and it terrifies me. But I'd rather be terrified and with you than safe and alone. Claire didn't say anything. She just pulled him close and kissed him, hard and desperate, like she was trying to pour everything she felt into that one moment. When they finally broke apart, she was crying. Not sad tears, but the kind that came when something inside you finally broke open. I'm falling in love with you too, she whispered, and it scares the hell out of me. Good. We can be terrified together. She laughed through her tears, and Noah kissed her again, softer this time, like a promise. They stayed on the pier long after the party ended, holding each other while the waves crashed below and the world spun on without them. And for the first time since they'd met, Noah let himself believe it. This was real. This was theirs. And maybe, just maybe, it was going to last. When they finally drove home, the silence in the car was comfortable, the kind that only happened when two people had said everything that mattered and didn't need to fill the space with noise. Noah walked Claire to her door, and she kissed him goodnight, her hands cupping his face. Thank you for tonight, she said. Thank you for asking me. I mean it, Noah. Thank you for taking a chance on this. On us. Always. He watched her go inside, then walked back to his own house, feeling lighter than he had in years. Leo was asleep when he got home, sprawled across his bed with one arm hanging off the side. Noah pulled the blanket over him, brushed the hair off his forehead, and stood there for a moment, just watching him breathe. This was his life. Messy, imperfect, full of uncertainty. But it was his, and now Claire was part of it too. And that was more than enough. The morning after the fundraiser, Noah woke up with a clarity he hadn't felt in years. The sun was streaming through the window, Leo was humming some made-up song in the kitchen, and for once, Noah didn't feel the weight of everything pressing down on him the moment he opened his eyes. He got out of bed, pulled on a sweatshirt, and found Leo at the table eating cereal and drawing in a notebook. Morning, bud. Morning. How was the fancy party? It was okay. Claire looked really pretty. Leo grinned. Did you tell her that? I did. Good. You're supposed to tell people when they look nice. Where'd you learn that? Mrs. Patterson. She says compliments are free, and you should give them away like candy. Noah smiled and ruffled Leo's hair. Mrs. Patterson's a smart lady. They spent the morning together doing nothing in particular, watching cartoons, building an elaborate fort out of couch cushions, playing a game Leo had invented that involved throwing socks into a laundry basket from increasingly ridiculous distances. It was simple and easy and exactly what Noah needed. Around noon, Claire texted, "Can I come over?" "Of course." We're in the middle of an intense sock-throwing competition, but you're welcome to join. She showed up 20 minutes later, still in her pajamas with a hoodie thrown over them, her hair in a messy bun. She looked softer than she had at the fundraiser, more like herself, and Noah felt that familiar warmth spread through his chest. "Who's winning?" she asked, surveying the living room, which was now littered with socks. "Leo," Noah admitted. "He's got a killer arm." "I've been practicing," Leo said proudly. Claire sat down on the couch and watched them finish the game, laughing when Noah's final throw sailed past the basket and hit the wall. When it was over, Leo declared himself the champion and ran off to his room to add a trophy to his imaginary awards collection, leaving Noah and Claire alone. "Last night was good," Claire said quietly. "Yeah, it was." "I meant what I said. On the pier." "So did I." She looked at him, her expression open and vulnerable in a way that still surprised him. "I've been thinking about what comes next. For us." Noah's stomach tightened. "Okay." "I don't mean in a scary way. I just mean I don't want to keep living like we're in two separate houses that happen to be next to each other. I want this to be real, not just something we're trying out." "It is real. I know. But I want to make it official. I want to be part of your life, part of Leo's life, not just someone who comes over when it's convenient." Noah reached for her hand. "You're already part of our life, Claire. You have been for a while. I want more than that. I want to build something with you, a future. Not someday, but now." Noah felt the weight of what she was saying, and instead of scaring him, it settled over him like something solid and grounding. "What are you asking?" "I'm asking if you'd want to move in together, or if I could move in here, or we could find a place that's ours. I don't care about the logistics. I just care about being with you." Noah stared at her, his heart pounding. A few months ago, the idea would have terrified him. But now, sitting here with Claire looking at him like he was the answer to a question she'd been asking herself for years, it didn't feel scary. It felt right. "Yes," he said simply. "Yes?" "Yes, let's do it." Claire's face broke into a smile so wide it looked like it hurt. "Really? Really? I don't want to keep pretending we're taking this slow when we both know we're not. You're here all the time anyway. Let's just make it official." She threw her arms around him, nearly knocking him backward on the couch. "I was so nervous to ask. I thought you'd think it was too fast." "It probably is too fast, but I don't care." "Me neither." They sat there holding each other, and Noah felt like he'd just made the easiest and most terrifying decision of his life. The next few weeks were chaos in the best possible way. Claire started moving her things over in stages, first the essentials, then the furniture she couldn't part with, then the boxes of books and kitchen supplies that Noah didn't realize they needed until she unpacked them. The house that had felt too small for just him and Leo suddenly felt full in a way that didn't overwhelm him. It felt alive. Leo was thrilled. He helped Claire organize her clothes in the closet, offered unsolicited opinions on where she should put her desk, and declared that having her there made everything better. "It's like having a family again," he said one night at dinner, his voice casual but his meaning heavy. Noah glanced at Claire, and she looked back at him with tears in her eyes. "Yeah, bud," Noah said, his throat tight. "It is. But not everything was seamless. There were adjustments, compromises, moments of friction that neither of them had anticipated. Claire was used to living alone, to having control over her space, to being able to retreat when she needed quiet. Noah was used to chaos, to Leo's constant noise, to a house that never stayed clean for more than 5 minutes. They clashed over small things, how to load the dishwasher, who left the lights on, whose turn it was to take out the trash. It wasn't serious, but it was real, and it reminded them both that building a life together wasn't just about love. It was about learning to coexist in the messy, mundane ways that nobody ever talked about. One night, about 3 weeks after Claire had officially moved in, they had their first real fight. It started with something stupid. Noah had forgotten to pick up groceries on his way home, which meant they didn't have anything for dinner. Claire had been counting on him to remember, and when he walked in empty-handed, her frustration spilled over. "I asked you this morning," she said, her voice tight. "I specifically asked you to stop at the store." "I forgot. I'm sorry." "You've been forgetting a lot lately." "I've been busy. So have I, Noah. But I still manage to remember the things I say I'm going to do." Noah bristled. Are we really fighting about groceries? We're fighting about the fact that I can't rely on you to follow through. That's not fair, isn't it? You said you'd handle dinner tonight. You said you'd pick up Leo's prescription yesterday and you didn't. You said you'd fix the leaky faucet last week and it's still dripping. I've had a lot on my plate. So have I. But I'm still showing up. The words hit harder than Noah expected, and he felt his defenses go up. What's that supposed to mean? It means I'm trying, Noah. I'm trying to make this work, to be here for you and Leo, to build something together. But it feels like I'm the only one putting in the effort. That's not true. Then why do I feel like I'm carrying all the weight? Noah opened his mouth to argue, then stopped. Because she was right. He had been dropping the ball lately, letting things slide because he was overwhelmed and tired and falling back into old habits. He'd been so focused on not screwing up the big things that he'd ignored the small ones, and those small things mattered. You're right, he said quietly. I'm sorry. I've been slacking. Claire looked surprised, like she'd been bracing for a fight and didn't know what to do now that he'd agreed with her. I'm not trying to attack you. I'm tired, Noah. And I need to know that we're in this together. We are. I promise. I'll do better. I don't need perfect. I just need consistent. I can do that. They stood there at the kitchen, the tension slowly draining out of the room. Claire sighed and leaned against the counter. I'm sorry too. I shouldn't have unloaded on you like that. I've been stressed about work, and I took it out on you. It's okay. It's not. We both need to be better at communicating before we get to the point where we're yelling about groceries. Noah laughed, and the sound broke the last of the tension. Yeah, that was pretty stupid. We're stupid. Agreed. They ordered pizza that night, and while they waited for it to arrive, they sat on the couch and talked, really talked, about what they needed from each other. Not in some grand, sweeping way, but in the small, practical ways that made living together work. Noah promised to be more reliable. Claire promised to speak up when something was bothering her instead of letting it fester. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a start. As the weeks turned into months, Noah and Claire fell into a rhythm that felt less like trying and more like living. They figured out who made coffee in the morning and who handled bedtime routines. They learned each other's moods, when to give space and when to push. They built traditions. Friday movie nights, Sunday morning pancakes, walks on the beach when the weather was nice. And Leo thrived in the middle of it all. His grades improved. His behavior at school stabilized. He laughed more, worried less, and started talking about the future in a way that suggested he actually believed in it. One afternoon in early spring, Noah was working at the dining table when Leo came home from school with a permission slip for a class trip. We're going to the aquarium, Leo said, handing over the paper. Can I go? Of course, sounds fun. Leo hesitated, then added, Can Claire come too, as a chaperone? Noah looked up, surprised. You want her to come? Yeah, she's good at explaining stuff, and she's fun. I'll ask her. When Claire got home that evening, Noah mentioned it, expecting her to laugh it off or make some excuse about work, but instead she lit up. Really? He wants me to come? Yeah, he specifically asked for you. Claire's eyes got a little watery. I'd love to. The day of the trip, Noah watched Claire and Leo walk to the bus together. Claire crouched down, listening intently as Leo explained something about dolphins. And in that moment, Noah felt something shift inside him. This wasn't just a relationship anymore. This was a family. Imperfect, unconventional, held together by choice rather than obligation. But a family nonetheless. That night, after Leo was asleep, Noah found Claire on the porch, staring out at the ocean. Thank you, he said, sitting down beside her. For what? For loving him, for being here, for choosing us. Claire leaned her head on his shoulder. You make it sound like a sacrifice. Isn't it? No, it's the easiest thing I've ever done. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the sound of the waves filling the space between them. I've been thinking, Claire said eventually. About? About the future, about what I want my life to look like. Noah's stomach tightened. And I don't want to keep doing what I've been doing. The consulting, the endless hustle, the work that doesn't mean anything. I want to do something that matters. Like what? I don't know yet. But I want to figure it out, and I want to do it here, with you and Leo. Not because I'm giving up on my career, but because I'm choosing a different path. One that doesn't require me to sacrifice everything else. Noah took her hand. I think that's the bravest thing you've ever said. It's terrifying. The best things usually are. Over the next few months, Claire started pulling back from her consulting work, taking only the projects that genuinely interested her and turning down everything else. She started exploring other options, teaching, mentoring, maybe even starting her own business that aligned with her values instead of just her bank account. It wasn't easy. There were moments of doubt, moments where she questioned whether she was making a mistake. But Noah was there, reminding her that it was okay to want something different, that success didn't have to look the way everyone else said it should. And slowly, Claire started to believe it. One evening in late April, they were sitting on the beach watching the sunset when Claire turned to Noah with a seriousness that made his heart skip. I need to ask you something, she said. Okay. Do you ever think about the future? Like, really think about it? All the time. What do you see? Noah looked at her, then out at the water. I see us. I see Leo growing up, starting high school, maybe even college someday. I see us still here, still doing this. Maybe getting married if that's something you want. Maybe having more kids if we're brave enough. I see a life that's messy and imperfect and better than anything I could have imagined a year ago. Claire was quiet for a moment, and when Noah looked at her, she was crying. What's wrong? He asked, alarmed. Nothing. Everything. She wiped her eyes. I didn't think I'd ever have this. I spent so long convincing myself that I didn't need it, that I was fine on my own. And then you tackled me at the beach and ruined everything. Noah laughed. Sorry about that. Don't be. It's the best thing that ever happened to me. She reached into her pocket and pulled out something small. A ring. Not an engagement ring, but a simple silver band. I'm not proposing, she said quickly. I wanted you to have this. As a promise. That I'm not going anywhere. That I'm choosing this, choosing us, every single day. Noah took the ring, his hands shaking slightly. Claire, you don't have to say anything. I just wanted you to know. But Noah did have something to say. He'd been thinking about it for weeks, turning it over in his mind, trying to find the right words. And now, sitting here with Claire looking at him like he was the answer to every question she'd ever asked, the words came easily. Marry me, he said. Claire blinked. What? Marry me. Not someday. Not when we're ready. Now. Let's stop waiting for the perfect moment and just do it. Noah, you don't have to. I want to. I've wanted to for a while now. I just didn't know how to ask. But I'm asking now. Marry me, Claire. Build a life with me. Not because it's perfect, but because it's ours. Claire stared at him, tears streaming down her face. Are you serious? Completely. We're a mess. I know. We fight about groceries. I know. And you still want to marry me? More than anything. Claire laughed through her tears, then threw her arms around him. Yes. Yes, 1,000 times. Yes. They sat there on the beach, holding each other while the sun dipped below the horizon, and Noah felt like his entire life had been leading to this moment. Not the grand gestures or the perfect plans, but this. Two broken people choosing to be whole together. When they got home, Leo was sitting on the couch, reading, and he looked up when they walked in. Why are you both crying? He asked, alarmed. We're not crying, Noah said, even though they clearly were. You are. What happened? Claire crouched down in front of him. Your dad asked me to marry him. Leo's eyes went wide. Really? Really? And you said yes? I said yes. Leo processed this for a moment, then broke into the biggest smile Noah had ever seen. Does this mean you're going to be my mom? Claire's face crumpled. If that's okay with you. It's more than okay. It's awesome. He hugged her, and Noah watched them, his chest so full it felt like it might burst. They got married 2 months later in a small ceremony on the beach, with just a handful of people they actually cared about. It wasn't fancy or elaborate. Claire wore a simple white dress she'd found at a boutique in town. Noah wore the same suit he'd worn to the fundraiser, minus the crooked tie. Leo stood between them during the ceremony, holding their hands, and when the officiant pronounced them married, he cheered louder than anyone. It was imperfect and chaotic and exactly what they needed. Afterward, they had a small reception at a restaurant by the water, and as the evening wound down, Noah found himself standing on the deck with Claire, watching Leo chase fireflies with Dave's grandkids. "I can't believe this is real," Claire said. "What part?" "All of it. You, Leo, this life we've built." Noah pulled her close. "It's real, and it's ours. Do you think we'll make it?" "I think we already have." Claire looked up at him, and in her eyes, Noah saw everything they'd been through, the awkward beginning, the messy middle, the moments of doubt and fear and uncertainty. But he also saw everything they'd become, partners, family, home. "I love you," she said. "I love you too." They stood there watching Leo play, and Noah thought about how much had changed since that day at the beach, when he'd stumbled into Claire and thought he'd ruined everything. He'd been so scared then, so convinced that he wasn't enough, that his life was too broken to let anyone else in. But Claire had seen him, really seen him, and she'd stayed anyway. Not because he was perfect, but because he was real. And in choosing him, she'd given him the courage to choose her back. Life didn't get easier after that. There were still bills to pay, clients to manage, moments when Noah felt overwhelmed and Claire felt exhausted. There were still fights about stupid things and days when everything went wrong, but they faced it together, and that made all the difference. Because here's the thing. Nobody tells you about love. It's not about finding someone who completes you or fixes your problems or makes everything perfect. It's about finding someone who sees your mess and says, "Okay, let's figure this out together." It's about showing up, even when it's hard. It's about choosing each other every single day, even when you're tired and scared and not sure how it's all going to work out. Noah had spent so long believing he had to have it all together before he could let someone in. But the truth was, he didn't need to be perfect. He just needed to be willing to try. And Claire had taught him that. She'd shown him that vulnerability wasn't weakness, that asking for help wasn't failure, that love wasn't about being flawless. It was about being human. A year later, they were still figuring it out. Claire had started a small consulting business that let her work on her own terms, taking only projects that mattered to her. Noah had finally learned to say no to clients who didn't respect his time, focusing on quality over quantity. Leo was thriving in school, talking about wanting to be a marine biologist when he grew up. They'd turned the small rental house into something that actually felt like home. There were family photos on the walls, Claire's books mixed with Noah's scattered paperwork, Leo's drawings covering the fridge. It was messy and imperfect and absolutely theirs. One Sunday morning in early summer, they were having breakfast on the porch when Leo looked up from his pancakes and said, "Dad, do you remember when you knocked Claire into the ocean?" Noah groaned. "Are you ever going to let me forget that?" "Nope, it's the best story ever," Claire laughed. "He's right. It is. It was humiliating." "It was perfect," Claire said, reaching for his hand. "If you hadn't tripped that day, we'd probably still be strangers waving from driveways." "Would that have been so bad?" "Yes," both Claire and Leo said at the same time. Noah looked at them. His son and his wife, sitting on the porch of a house that had once felt too small and too lonely and now felt just right. And he felt that familiar warmth spread through his chest. This was his life, not the one he'd planned, not the one he thought he deserved, but the one he'd built anyway. With Claire, with Leo, one imperfect, beautiful day at a time. And as they sat there together, watching the morning sun climb higher in the sky, Noah understood something he'd been too scared to believe before. Sometimes the things that look like disasters turn out to be exactly what you need. Sometimes falling down is how you learn to get back up. And sometimes the person you think is completely out of your reach turns out to be the one who's been reaching back all along. You just have to be brave enough to let them in. And when you do, when you stop running from the mess and start building something in the middle of it, you might just find that the life you were afraid of is actually the life you've been searching for all along. Noah had found that, and he wasn't letting go.